Welcome back to The Short Game, a show about short video games, games that respect your time. My name's Nate Heininger, and I'm joined by two fantastic hosts today. We've got Laura J. Nash. How are you?
I'm great. I'm loving you name dropping the J.
You use it on
Twitter.
things.
I do, yes.
On Twitter, okay.
Yep.
And it's always stuck in my head that you're Laura J. Nash.
It's a good name.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, I agree. And Shane Excelsior Kelly.
David Shane Sheretz Kelly.
Thank you. Someone knows all my many names. I'm feeling very good today.
Wonderful. I feel like this is the third or fourth podcast where I've remembered or been reminded that Shane is your middle name.
Yes, it comes up with surprising regularity in my life.
Yeah, I've known you for a long time, and that fact never sticks. Same with Reagan, who's not with us today. He is off on a wonderful trip, gallivanting across Europe with his wife, and so we're sorry he missed this one. I think this would have been right up his alley, but we're hoping he's having a good time out in Europe. And today we are talking about Donut County, the long-awaited Donut County. Yeah.
Terrific.
It's been on our wanting to play list since 2012.
Yeah, right? So this game was published by Annapurna Interactive, a name that is starting to get more and more press and cred behind it as they release new and better games over and over. But it was developed by one person, Ben Esposito. Now, this has, as we just hinted at, it's had a long development cycle, and with any long development cycle comes usually a crazy development story. And we did a little bit of research on it because I think it's part of the whole thing with this game.
The whole thing with this game?
Nice. So, Laura, I know you did a lot of the research. Let's talk about what took this so long to come out.
Well, the premise of Donut County is that you play as a hole in the ground, and it's this story-filled physics puzzle game. That's how Ben likes to describe it. It actually started off for the Game Jam based on a parody, a tweet from a parody Peter Molyneux account.
Yeah, there's a parody account that it's come up a few times in my online life, this account, because it's just so funny. For those who might not know Peter Molyneux, he's the guy that came up with the game Black and White. He came up with, I want to say Populous. I might have some of these wrong, but he's famous for these big sandboxy, quote-unquote, God games.
And this is Peter Molyneux is the parody.
So the idea of this account was basically just throwing out BS video game ideas that could never work, except in this case, one did.
And at first it didn't. That's the really fun part, is that...
Yeah, through a lot of grit and determination and self-awareness and many different versions, they were able to make a game out of this.
So the original tweet was, you play a hole, you must move around an environment, making certain elements fall into correct targets at the right time. And except for the correct targets bit, it's pretty much spot on with what this game ended up being.
Yeah, but there are correct targets even still.
True.
The puzzles are real minor in this game, but if you want to be very literal, you often have to make the correct target fall into the hole for the first step of the puzzle.
That is true.
So, yeah.
So he takes this game, he does a game jam, and then he develops this game called Kachina, and it's based on Hopi culture, and then he basically later on gave a talk at GDC a year later in 2015 about failure, that was like, yep, I totally culturally appropriated all of Hopi culture. I know nothing about them. I thought their art style was cool. I took a bunch of names. He's like, I shouldn't have done that. And then I also realized that the game didn't make any sense. It was supposed to be spiritual, and I had no connection to it. So he completely scratched it and decided to make it about LA and gentrification, and like raccoons were invading his apartment. And so he said, I was kind of inspired by my first LA apartment, where the place was definitely run by raccoons. It was intense. I mean, I love them, but it's fucked up. So he starts taking that, and he realized that the hole wasn't the point. It was what you put in the hole. This is sounding unintentionally dirty, but what you put in the hole is what matters. So, he realized that the story wasn't you, the destructive force, the whole. He also said he did a lot of game testing, and people got super bummed about, like, he made all these cute environments, and then you sucked them all into a hole, and then you were left with a blank screen. And people were like, well, it felt great putting stuff in the hole, and then I felt super sad when it was empty. So he realized he had to have story.
There were several times in this game where I felt bad about making the things fall into the hole. We're going to talk about the art design later, but it is very cute. And I got to throw the comp right up front because immediately it reminded me of Katamari.
Yes.
Now, it's not the same in that, obviously, Katamari, you're rolling around this giant ball. It's getting bigger. It allows you to absorb more and more stuff, and that stuff sticks on the ball, and it just creates more and more chaos. It's essentially the same thing, only this, you're starting with a real small hole, and stuff's falling into the hole, and the hole's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, allowing you to drop larger things into it. But there was something about like, when you'd stick something to the ball in Katamari, you'd still see it there, and the things were
persistent.
I don't know. They're always there, and it just seems so unlikely that it didn't really matter. Like, I did not feel bad about absorbing like 100 people in Katamari, and the whole thing was chaos, right? Everything's running away from you. Everything is insane. In this, you're dropping, like, I don't know, adorable little animals, and they just fall, and you kind of know where they go because of the story, but it also might imply that they're just gone. And sometimes, and some, like, very few creatures actually seem to ever even be aware that they were about to fall into a hole, but when they did, they would run in pure panic. Like the little lizards, like, they seemed to know something was up, and that made it worse. I liked it when they just fell unknowingly into the hole.
We play a lot of games where we hear stories about refining the mechanic. This is one of the few stories behind a game where you hear about the concept constantly being rethought. Is like, the mechanic was never in question, but the story behind it was completely rewritten many, many, many times because he realized you have to play a bad guy, but also have a start at redemption so you don't feel terrible. So that's kind of the big story behind it. Meanwhile, he kind of, to pay bills, he happened to work on Unfinished Swan and what happened to Edith Finch. So he got really good creds along the way.
Yeah, those are still two of my absolute favorite games that we've ever played for this show. Unfinished Swan was such a delight and a treat for me. And so that's just realizing there was that connection made me so excited about this game.
Yeah, and I think so. We're not really going to do a spoiler break on this episode, but we're also not really going to talk about, I guess, like, sort of the ending.
Yeah. Other than there's there is a boss battle.
Yeah, but I say that to say part of the joy of this game is understanding and learning what's actually happening. And I think that he probably, I'm totally, conjecturing here, but probably picked that up a little bit during the design of Unfinished Swan, for sure, and then maybe a little bit of What Remains of Edith Finch, because that is a game where you kind of have an idea of what's happening, but your understanding of, like, what and why you're doing the things that you're doing, it grows as you get further. Mm-hmm. And in this game, you are controlling a little hole in various scenes and settings and scenarios and absorbing everything on the land. And you don't really understand what or why you're doing it, other than the thing you do understand is that no one likes what you're doing. It's not
well, who wants to fall in a hole?
Yeah, it's not a good outcome.
It's so satisfying, but it's also awful.
Yeah, and I really liked that, and it was so there was so much unknown at the beginning of the game that it actually, I felt like I almost wish they did give you a little bit more, because there were some times at the beginning of the game where I was like, why am I even, is this just like a mini game where I'm just going to keep, like, just going around dropping things into holes and that's it? And the game grows and builds, and by the end of it, it's like a really complete package. But it's like really obscured at the beginning. Other than that, you're just, moving a little hole around. You can play this game on touchscreens or on a couple different consoles, and you're just controlling a little hole and starting with dropping, like, I don't know, a small rock, and that gets you big enough to drop, like, the coffee cup that's sitting there that gets you enough to drop like a brick, that gets you enough to drop a rabbit, and then it gets you enough to drop a chair, and it just gets up and up and up until, just like in Katamari, you're dropping like rocks and mountains and buildings and the entire setting.
It's really satisfying when you have things like, there's no objects small enough for you to pick up, but there's like a table covered in small objects. You can't drop the whole table, but you can get the leg of the table in the hole and then just whip the table around and knock everything off and then gobble up all the individual little items off the table. So it's a fun game. One thing I like about it in that play style there is like everything's pretty much on a single screen. So unlike Katamari, where you're like cruising around in a three-dimensional world, this has that kind of feel of a 2D kind of space, even though it is definitely 3D. The art style supports that too, with the lack of any kind of shading or lighting effects, and no textures on the objects. So it's really neat when you have this sort of scene laid out before you, and you just have to figure out piece by piece how to dismantle it, through the use of a growing hole in gravity.
Yeah, the just one last thing with the Katamari comp, and I won't talk about it anymore. It's just that's like one of my favorite games, and this is the first game I've played since Katamari that gives me even like an inkling of the feeling that Katamari gave me. Sidebar: why isn't there a Katamari on the Switch yet? It would be perfect. Game developers, who I forget the guy who owns Katamari, go and do it, because that would be awesome. But the big difference with this game to Katamari, in my opinion, besides like the tone and everything, is there's no timer. There's nothing that's like, there's no perfect path. Katamari was almost, you had to like figure out the perfect route to solve the level before the time ran out. This game, there is no timer. There are puzzles, and we'll talk about those here in a little bit, but it's pretty chill. You're just moving around a little hole, seeing if you can't figure out how to get something down into it, there's probably something else you got to figure out. There's nothing. The King of the Cosmos is not breathing down your neck, judging you for every single mistake that you make. It's just, you have all the time in the world to solve each area.
It's so mellow. In Marie Kondo, land of like, you gotta unclutter your life. I felt like this was what the video game was like, very Zen garden, like all of the same kind of clearing out, making an empty space. It's not to make yourself feel more relaxed, but it does feel weirdly calming and soothing, and it scratches that like itch of having a clear to-do list or something. You feel weirdly accomplished, is what I'm saying, because you've cleared out the land and destroyed some people's lives while you're at it. And that's completely different from Katamari Damacy, because that one you're just growing and growing and making more and more chaos as you go. This one is much more like clean plate, move on.
Yeah, you cleaned your plate.
Clean the plate, move on, and
identified the friendly neighbor who's minding their own business, going about their daily life, and making sure that you've absorbed them and everything that they love and own, and making sure it falls 999 feet below Donut County.
With that in mind, I mean, this game is really funny. You can tell that, like, I've, since my husband played it today, we've said lol to each other verbally about 30 times.
Yeah, it's got a really unique writing style. I don't know. I know we've got some quotes from it, but you kind of have to see it to totally understand it. But it is sort of that, like, I don't know. It's like internet culture writing without being full of memes, if that makes sense. A lot of short jokes, a lot of like people say LOL to each other, things like that. I don't know. I'll say this: it's not always funny, but they make everything is basically a joke, so it makes it overall funny. There's a lot of eye rolling jokes. At least I think it's probably everyone has their own limit, or will find different things funny. There's a lot. So here's a comparison. You know that internet meme where it's like a raccoon's not a raccoon, it's a trash panda, and a snake isn't a snake, it's a scary.
It's a live spaghetti.
A danger noodle. Like that is, I personally think, a really annoying. Like it's so overplayed at this point. Those jokes are all over this game, but the that's probably still funny to a lot of people, or maybe this game is their first time seeing it. But there's so many things like that it's not all funny to the individual, but overall, there's a lot of really, really funny stuff, and it made me laugh the majority of the time.
I think to me, a lot of the humor is just in the design and the kind of oddity of what you're actually seeing. You'll have these, weird scenarios like the cat restaurant.
Oh,
or
cat soup, which I think is a joke about ketchup, like the British cat soup.
Yeah, it's a pun, I guess. Yeah,
yes, it's a pun. Maybe if I was English, it would make more sense.
Yeah, or the not to throw a spoiler, but there's a water park for raccoons that I found just to be hilarious to see. So like a lot of visual jokes. I think,
and everything is doing its own thing until you're absorbing them. So, they're living their life, and they might be working in their little restaurant or driving their silly little car. They're all different animals or different types of things that look like animals. Not sure exactly what everything was. And like the world scales to fit that. So there are like mice doing their own little mice life in the world of giant like crocodiles having their
Some animals are sentient and some are not.
That's always a little uncomfortable. But so let's talk about the story a little bit more, because I really think outside of the small puzzle part, which I think we can talk about in a second, the story is what like moves the game forward, and it's the driving force of the game. And as you said, Laura, it's what the development was mostly about. So one of you want to give like a brief overview of what the story is, as far as you can tell, at least early on?
The story kind of drops you into, whole shifting pretty quick, but it starts off with the two characters, Mia, who is looks like about to be a teen girl with, cute hair and, cool outfit. She's always texting, so she's on her phone texting with BK, who is a talking, let's say, trash panda.
Yeah, thank you.
And so they're joking back and forth. He is at his job working at the donut shop, which is the kind of central location of the game. And he's texting back and forth with her about an app that he's downloaded. And it's a game, and he wants to go from level 9 to level 10 in order to get the quadcopter. It's not really clear initially like what the connection is between that and the actual gameplay with the whole. It took me a while to kind of catch on to that. I don't know if that was
think that's what I was talking about earlier, is everything is pretty obscured at first. You just know BK works at the donut shop in Donut County, and it starts out and he has to step away because someone has ordered a donut, which apparently in this world, I mean, I guess this probably also just exists in real with like Postmates and whatnot, but someone's ordered a donut and he's going to go deliver that donut. And then, or a donut. Somebody's delivered a donut. And then all of a sudden it says tap on the screen to place a hole. And you don't actually place the hole wherever you want. You just tap on the screen and it zooms in. And now you're controlling the hole and you start letting things fall into it.
It lets you know that BK is a little nefarious right off the bat, because Mia's like, oh, I'd go to work, but this guy keeps honking outside, and then he just like, you suck the dude into the dude on a scooter into a hole, and then she's like, oh, the honking stopped. He's like, yeah, I delivered him a donut. Like a little while later, someone actually asks him, like, what do you think a donut is?
It seems early. Like the thing you figure out relatively quick is whenever someone orders a donut, they are instead getting BK with his app that somehow places a hole in the real world that he's controlling, I guess, from his phone and dropping and just absorbing everything. And that's also, after you do that for the first time, it does sort of like a time jump, and you go now to 999, or I think it's 999 or 995 feet below Donut County, and there's like a little campfire. And it's all the townspeople all in a circle, and they're all just basically yelling at BK. And this all happens within like the first 10 minutes of the game. The first level where you're controlling the hole for the first time is very small. And so this is all very, very quick. And they're all yelling at BK. And they're really upset that they're down in this hole now. He's denying everything. And then basically like the gameplay loop of the game is somebody pipes up to blame BK. And then they're like, oh, how'd you fall in the hole? And yeah, and then it fades, and we then gain control of the hole and proceed to absorb everything that person who was just talking about, that we just saw around the campfire, everything and anything that's around them. And you just work your way through the game, slowly learning about the story of every person around this campfire and how they got dropped into the hole. And it's pretty delightful. I love that sort of bookending of a story. It's kind of like in a movie or a show or whatever. They like wake up in the hospital. They're like, let me tell you how I got here. But you're controlling it. So it's a lot more fun than that.
Yeah, Emily Short, who is an interactive fiction writer, she's kind of someone we like to talk about a lot, did a write-up, and she said this was a really interesting triangle identity problem, which is a very academic word for basically like, who are you? Because sometimes you're playing as BK, sometimes you're, on the townspeople side, but it gives you this weird shifting allegiance thing where it's awfully fun to suck things into a hole, but then you have to have everyone tell you that was a horrible thing to do, but then you keep being a hole.
Yeah.
She's like, should I stop being a hole? And I was like, well, no, because you want to keep playing the game.
There's no option to not drop things.
There's no option not to.
You're not making a moral choice here.
It's in the past. It's already said. It's already done.
That's right.
It's BK's fault. He's already done it. You're just reliving it.
One of the funnier parts about, BK is constantly denying everything. I didn't do it. But then like little bits of dialogue might indicate that, for one reason or another, falling in the hole has provided a benefit. They all get to spend more time together or whatever. BK will be like, see, isn't this great? And they're like, I thought you didn't do it. He's like, I didn't do it. And it just like, yeah,
whoever did it is awesome.
Yeah, it's the campfire scenes are strange and funny, and they just keep, like, new characters pop up, and then you go out and absorb them, and it just sort of builds from there. It's everyone, you learn a lot about the different strange characters, and then you also learn a lot about BK and why he's doing this. But it is weird because you're not like in the eyes of BK. He's just another townsperson in the row. And whenever you are doing the game, it's not like you are BK. There's like a little icon in the corner that kind of indicates that you're BK, but even that takes a little while to figure it out that, you're BK. It feels like two different things going on. And it took me a while to even realize, like, I am BK and this is me doing this.
It feels intentional that you have that weird cognitive dissonance about, like, who are you and am I the bad guy? It's a little confusing. But what I love about each scene and what makes me think that you're just like playing the app along with BK, like suddenly you're in the app, is that you finish a level and then you get this great delivery scene where you see your adorable character falling like Alice in Wonderland down the hole, and it plays this amazing music.
It's fantastic.
It's so good. I hope you just play it right here. And then you can look at the Trashpedia, which is very much like Katamari Damacy, and Have a Garbage Day pops up as a load screen, which if you buy this on iOS, you get a sticker pack for your messages, and it's actually really funny. Have a Garbage Day is one of the stickers you can send people, and I have been sending it to people all week who have no idea what this game is.
Yeah, the Trashpedia is funny too, because you're just going through and it just gives you a little list of everything that you have absorbed, and this is the highest concentration of jokes, and it is exactly the same sort of thing where I was talking about Trash Panda, but they're doing it for everything. So like a cup, a chair, or whatever, and it has like some silly definition of what it is. And like, I don't know, 7 out of 10 of them aren't funny, or at least I did not find them funny. But the 3 out of the 10 that were funny were, I thought, really, really funny. So it was worthwhile to go through this Trashopedia after every single level and see what stupid interpretation of this various thing was.
That's a feature that I think is one of the things they borrowed most directly from Katamari. Katamari did this exact thing, having an encyclopedia of all the objects that you've ever collected up with funny names and facts about them. This one I think does it just right because it makes it very optional, but it does put it in your face between every level. So if you're not in the mood to charge on into the next cutscene, which you might not be, you can just sort of flip through some of these objects, looking back at the past scene, and see what dumb joke they make about the weird geckos that you grabbed.
We were kind of talking about how each level has its own sort of puzzle or thing, and I think let's talk about those because that's the other like sort of big mechanic of the game. So you're not only just dropping things into a hole. Sometimes there are things that you cannot get access to by just sliding under it. You have to interact with either one or a series of objects on the screen in order to get access to it. Like the most simple one is what Shane was talking about. Knock over the table so you can get the stuff on top of it. But really early on, they start introducing really simple mechanics, and by the end of the game, it's a little bit more complicated.
Never gets like full all-out puzzle to me. It stays pretty straightforward throughout the whole game, but every level does consistently introduce some twist, and it usually takes the form of some object that you can drop into the hole that has some kind of lingering effect. So the first level that really has it is the second one, where you are just sort of by the side of the road. They've ordered a kind of a dog mom and boy have ordered a donut. Not clear who ordered the donut. So you're trying to collect all this thing and stuff. You can get almost everything, but somebody is in a hot air balloon. So the young boy is in a hot air balloon, and so obviously he won't be falling into the hole anytime soon. But so to complete that level, you collect the kind of pottery kiln that has a roaring fire inside of it, and as you do that, hot air starts to rise out of the hole, and you can use that to make the hot air balloon float away. And that's kind of an impetus for some of the story stuff later on. The flying boy in the hot air balloon is a thing that comes back for you in the story later.
My sweet puppin' boy.
Yeah, and then some later with fire. There's one where you absorb a campfire, and then there's just sort of like smoke and like little sparks coming out of the hole, and then a bird coughs up a battery or charcoal or something like that. Yeah, and if you drop that into the hole, you have like 3 seconds, and then a flame will shoot out of the hole. And so you'll use that to burn up some things to make it more accessible to fall into the hole. And like, that's really simple versions of it. It gets a little bit more complicated. There's like things that you shoot out of the hole, like fireworks, that you have to hit stuff in the sky. You have to time it just a little bit. It's like the most forgiving timing of any game.
The rabbits were the weirdest one.
Yeah, I think this reminded me of a little bit of like a very tight vocabulary version of Scribblenauts, which is a game where you can put any word on screen and it appears, and you use it to solve puzzle. This was much like you have a couple things in the environment, and you have to learn how to combine them in your hole to solve the problem. And there's every level has its own little variant. I was surprised at the flexibility. I wouldn't say there's no consistency between levels, but there's no worry about making levels feel the same. There's no like, here's one mechanic, and then we're going to do that for 4 levels. No, you're going to learn one trick, and then the next level you're going to learn another trick. And towards the end you combine them, but it's more interested in exploring everything about the whole than trying to, get everything out of one mechanic.
So I agree. With that being said, that is one of the only criticisms I have of this game, and it's not even a criticism, it's more just like I wish it was more of something, because I really enjoyed this game, but I think the second half of the game is considerably better than the first half of the game, and I think that's because in the second half of the game those mechanics do become more complicated, and it's not much more than drop a now you have fire in the hole so you can
but they'll combine, and that makes a huge difference.
And I think I wish that just is how it started, because I think the player would have understood. I part of me thinks that it starts off like really, really simple, just because that's how standard games go, and you sort of learn and you get better. But the game is so short that when the hole dropping mechanic starts to get more than just like a little satisfying, it actually gets like interesting and more challenging. That's when the game was the most fun for me, and I wish that there was more of that, or at least at the beginning of the levels or the first levels be longer, and let the scale of the things that you're absorbing be more of it, because they're very, very short, and that's fine. It's a short game overall, and obviously that's kind of our thing here. But I just like the first few levels. It was interesting, but it wasn't really fun until the end, when there was way more scale and you're absorbing like big buildings and things like that, and you're solving just slightly more complicated puzzles. So I wish that would have been the case the entire game, because it was more fun.
That said, my 7-year-old nephew, who did not have the patience or wherewithal for Breath of the Wild yet, it was incredibly frustrating for him. I can't wait to play this with him over Christmas break, because I think he's going to be super, like, he's a destructive being, because all children are. He's going to love pouring things down holes. And it being so forgiving up front means towards the end, when you do have to combine, he's going to feel like he's got it. Like, there's not a lot of games that I like that he also can feel like he has mastery over. Like, I generally like harder games than children.
What?
Which is totally
Go figure.
Well,
so it's rare to find a game that both of us will enjoy.
I guess, and I don't mean to say I wish this game were harder, because I can totally enjoy a not hard game. I just thought it was a considerably more interesting use of the mechanic later, for the second half of the game, and I wish that would have been the case throughout, because I think that would have been more worthwhile, like because the game is so short, more worthwhile of the time. But I really only say this to say that if you pick up this game and you play the first few levels and like nothing is really making sense, and you're just dropping things into a hole, and these characters are weird, and that like I don't understand what I'm doing, I think that's mostly the point. Keep going, because it just gets better and better and better, and by the end of the game I was really into it. So I don't know if the beginning of the game represents itself as well as the back half of the game does.
Yeah, it takes 4 or 5 levels in, and oddly the Great Delivery progress bar actually going between level 9 and level 10, which is when everything goes horribly south, which is implied with the 6 week later. You see a nice progress bar. I would love more short games to have a sense of progress, to know how far in the game I am, because I always knew how many levels in. So look at the progress bar, give it a quarter through the progress bar before you call it quits. That's not a lot of time, to be honest. It's about 15 minutes. So give it more than 15 minutes before you decide if you want to keep playing the game. What a hardship.
I know.
Yeah, this is one of the very few games that we've played for the show that I really was able to complete in one sitting. Our whole hunt on this show is for games that are really short, obviously, but it's very, very rare that I have a satisfying game experience that is this short and this complete feeling. Like I'm kind of in the opposite camp from Nate. Like, I don't feel like a really expansive exploration of these mechanics would have really held up. Like, could you play like a 6-hour version or an 8-hour version of this game and still feel like you were having a great time? I'm not totally convinced. I think it's really a perfect length, and I would struggle to come up with more ways to have like weird special effects on the whole. Like I guess you could have a laser beam fall in the hole or something. I don't know, but it's not. It's just they pretty much run the gamut of like the basic elemental type stuff like fire and water, and they have the thing with the rabbits, like I said, which I think was the most creative use if 2 rabbits fell in the hole, they would breed, and a bunch of rabbits would fly out. You'd see little hearts, and then you'd pick up more rabbits, and your hole would get even bigger and bigger. So that was pretty hilarious. I just don't see this expanding out past that. So I guess I don't really consider this a critique of the game. I think the scale of the game and the nature of the game are really paired beautifully together. I wouldn't want it.
That's totally fair. And I don't even know if I'm verbalizing exactly how I felt. I just know that when I first started in the first, I would have said maybe a little bit more than 15 minutes, but not that far into the game, I was like, man, this hole is a lot of fun. I wish I was doing more with it early. And I just picture more the world collapsing down on top of itself, and more I don't know, Rube Goldbergian things where you're making things collapse and making things. I guess I was missing the chaos.
You wanted a chain. You played Guacamelee, and now you want chains.
I think I would have loved more world chaos going on. Other than the lizards I was talking about, nothing seems to really ever acknowledge that they're about to fall into a hole. And I guess I would have liked that a little bit more. Not that I need to see the fear in my victim's eyes, but I wanted the world to collapse and fall on itself a little bit more, and bring everything down with it. But I really don't want to sit on this for too long, because this is a real minor thing, because I did ultimately really enjoy the game. I just that's something I felt at the beginning when I was playing it. And so if you're playing this game, if you've listened to this episode and you decide to buy it, which I really hope that you do, and you don't feel as jived about it as we are right now, give it some time, because it gets it's better and better and better as it's going on, at least for me.
Something that has, other than the fact that you play an asshole, and I'm quoting the developer on that, he said you're basically playing an asshole. Other than that, the other big divisive thing on this is some people love the visuals, and some people think the visuals look like someone who wasn't trying very hard. It's something that I found when I was reading all these articles on Ben Esposito in the background, is that he tried to take everything off of Unity so that it would still look cute in 3D. And so it looks very blocky, and that might be partly why everyone's comparing it to Katamari, because it does look like kind of an old PlayStation game in many aspects. That kind of weird blocky texture. But something I found, he said that part of that look is so that you don't feel guilty. By making the environment so candy colored and so blocky and so abstract, it makes you not feel guilty when you destroy people's lives. More games where you play as the villain and you're destroying a candy covered world that you don't care as much. It's very funny.
The thought process of, I don't want them to care about it, so let's make it cute. It's not, that doesn't seem to jive. I wish they were I don't know, hideous.
Yeah, he said it's pastel colored glasses, which kind of absolve you of the questionable things you do as a hole in the ground. And I was like, it actually makes me feel a little worse.
The little rabbits and everything are adorable. And the little lizards and they're running around, I don't know. It didn't work.
My favorite thing is that dumb pug that doesn't have any joints in its legs. So it just bounces straight up in the air with these locked legs and just falls on its side. And it's the most that stupid rolling dog. I put it in the hole. I was like, can I just not suck the dog in the hole and just watch it run around in its physics-based world for another 30 minutes? Because it's really bumming me out that I have to this dog is not going to be in my life anymore.
This is talking about the art style. This is no one of you two made, but I want to make sure it gets in there too. Is that there are things that you are often having to shoot up into the sky, and they make it very clearly marked with shadows beneath the thing that you're shooting up to, and so it makes it very easy. You just line the hole up and shoot it, and it's so nice because of that 3D angle. I feel it would be very frustrating to try to line up exactly under it. So it's a great little design choice, and makes it this game is never frustrating, and I think it's for reasons like that.
So that can be really hard in an isometric environment where everything is tilted to figure out what is below what. Just putting a beam of light down, life's so much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love that. So let's talk about the music briefly, because it's pretty wacky and fits perfectly for this game. And because this game went through so much development and the developer has been very, very vocal about his experiences, we also, of course, have a great quote about his thought process for the music in this game. So he said, "We kind of went back and forth and whittled it down, and this is a culmination of 6+ years of music, and that we figured out a feel and a vibe for together. It's this kind of LA beat scene-inspired soundtrack. It's super textured, and it's all field recordings and stuff, mixed with super bright ukulele." It's that part right there at the end, the ukulele, that stands out throughout the entire soundtrack as well.
And he was trying not to make it twee, which makes complete sense.
Right.
I didn't realize, because I haven't lived in LA since I was 5, that this was an LA-based game until there was a scene in Joshua Tree. But if you live in the LA neighborhood, apparently there's a ton of Easter eggs. It becomes increasingly obvious, including like the observatory and the Hollywood sign and all these other references. But he tried to make it sound like LA music, and I have no idea what that is. But apparently that's what the music sounds like, is LA in the 2000s.
With ukulele. So like electronic.
With ukulele.
Yeah. So it's good. It's wacky, and it works for there's most of the time it fades into the background and just sort of sets a tone. But there are a few, like Laura mentioned earlier, the music that plays during the Great Delivery scene that plays, after every single level, that I looked forward to every single time.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. I wouldn't say that the music for this game was like a standout aspect of it to me. Like I walked away. A lot of the games we play, I walk away thinking, "Oh man, I got to go download that soundtrack. That was pretty rad." And this game, like, maybe it's maybe I align with them in a slight disdain for the ukulele. But yeah, I didn't walk away from this one thinking like I need to go and re-listen. But that said, like, the tone and feel of the game is very complemented by it, so it definitely works.
The composer's name is Dan Kostner, and he has if I remember correctly, he does R&D on Ocean Optics. So he's not really a full-time music developer. For anybody who's doing that and then is going to make this game, kudos to you.
That's crazy.
One of the most kind of odd things about this game is that it was a symptom of this sort of trend of indie games getting really quickly cloned. It's maybe now the worst example of that. In the past, we've seen kind of indie favorites of our show, like get clones that then even went on to sometimes make as much money as the game that they were cloning. The worst example for me of that was like 2048, which was a clone of Threes. Threes, still an all-time favorite game of mine. Most people know 2048 because it was free. Now, so the whole concept, I said it again, the concept of the whole of this game is pretty easy to clone, really, because you know the idea of having a hole moving around in a level that things fall into and the hole gets bigger. It's not it's not an impossible thing to duplicate. And so while this game was in its, I don't know how many year development
6
cycle,
years.
like
6
year development cycle, somebody went and just took the idea of the game and created something called Hole.io, which to me seems just kind of like what's the term they use for games that are just like a bunch of free Unity assets just sort of like thrown together?
I don't know.
Shit.
I don't know. There's a word for that. Maybe it'll come to me. But
clone,
yeah, so this is one of those. Yeah.
Pastiche clone.
It's like asset laundering or something. There's a term for it. But basically, this is a game where it seems like they took just the idea and made it, because it looks very different. It looks like a top-down Grand Theft Auto style game. I've only seen like some screenshots and videos of it, but I do think this is just a symptom of the game's industry right now. Like, it's getting harder and harder to be an indie developer. You know, there's so much more competition out there, and I guess there's a lot of people that just want to take shortcuts and try and beat someone else to the punch, or put out a low effort game that, you know, copies someone else's work. And this game was so public with its development that it's not like a big AAA game where like they'll keep it super hush hush. This game was out there 100%. And so, boom. But it's interesting. There's not much that a developer can do in that kind of circumstance, because like the idea for a game or the mechanics of a game are not something that can be copyrighted. And so, you know, even in circumstances where there's a blatant ripoff of a game, there's not much that you can do about it. You can really, if they're not using your name, if they're not using your, your art, for example, they can make a 1-for-1 re-implementation of your game as long as they're doing, they're keeping your art out of it and they're using just pure, original stuff. So, it's kind of an irritating thing for me because I keep seeing it so much. But it did happen right in the run-up to the release of this game. I think
he was so lucky. It was only a few months out. Like, he was releasing in August, and just a couple months ago, the Holio came out, which is incredibly lucky considering it could have come out in 2016 and like scooped him by 2 years. So he got kind of lucky that he got cloned so close to the release date.
True, and it did sort of work out in a good way, I think, because almost all the literally all the coverage I saw of his game being cloned was just sort of trashing the clone and then, basically building hype for Donut County. So in this case, it seems to not have done too much.
Occam's razor conspiracy theory. No, he had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
I don't even want to bring that up.
Yeah, it is. It's a really strange thing in the App Store. I'm waiting for there to even be more like larger clones. Well, have you seen the like Overwatch clones that are out there and stuff like that? And they're even like clones of like Disney movies and things that are just like bad, that trick people. Like someone wants to go and buy their grandkid like Cars or something, and there's a movie that looks just like Cars, but it's not. It's a whole weird submarket that will probably just exist forever. So I'm really glad that this game finally came out. I think anyone who has played it is also feeling that way, and I think we definitely recommend checking this out. It is $4.99 on what is on iOS, PS4, and Switch. Not Switch. Sorry, no Switch. iOS, Mac, PC, and PlayStation 4.
Yeah, and today they updated the app, and now the little duck emoji that you can send when you're texting people that makes a quack noise, you can now send that to people.
I played it on iPad. It was great. Laura, you played it on iPhone, right? What did you play it on, Shane?
PS4. Looks great on that big old screen.
And I actually bet the controller with the hole would have been even more intuitive than the touchscreen, but the touchscreen was fine. You're just dragging it around a lot.
Well, as we wrap up our discussion of this game, because it was so beautifully inspired by the tweets of Peter Molyneux, I'd just like to share with you guys some of my favorite of his tweets. He's a very good follow on Twitter. So here are some free game ideas that all the game developers out there who are listening can obviously take this and, just spend the next 6 years on. Great one here. Have you ever noticed that all fighting games feature arms and legs? What if the fighters consisted entirely of various atmospheres and gases? So I think that'd be a good game to play. Another great game idea. Imagine a game with a playable ad where the advert gradually becomes the main game whilst the core game becomes the advert. Yeah, it's good for mobile, I think. And let's see. Imagine a reverse God game where you start off with a perfect world and have to destroy all life. And you can only control business transactions.
So the paperclip game.
Yes, actually, yes.
Universal paperclips. It's been
That's
created.
Which, speaking of, I mean, this is you're just reminding me of this, but I loved Universal paperclips so much, and then a few weeks later, I opened up my desk and I found a box of Universal brand paperclips, and I was like, oh no, they're real.
They're real.
It's a real brand of paperclip, and now we're all doomed.
Definitely.
Hey guys, what if every single pixel in a video game had a name?
Oh God. My cat's name is Pixel. I'm like kind of on my way there. This Pixel is a cat.
Well, I want to make an FPS, but if you kill someone, their pet cats follow you for the rest of the game, hauntingly meowing at you.
That is Reagan's worst nightmare. Reagan, who is on topic, or on the record, I guess, as being a questionable
Yeah.
cats.
Yeah.
And
wrong with him?
mouse traps. Reagan's creepy. We can say this because he's not here.
Yeah, we gotta do our standard tradition of the like one episode a year that Reagan isn't on. We just find a way to trash him.
Lovingly.
Hey, you guys want to talk shit about Freedom Planet?
Always.
I still haven't
Yeah.
played it.
Awesome. Well, you know, this is all making me happy. Making fun of Reagan always makes me happy. But before we close out, we are going to go into our new section, What's Making You Happy? So, Shane, tell me, what's making you happy this week?
Oh, I'm so happy this week. It's something that, you know, I have loved since I was young, but I received a package in the mail earlier this week that contained all of Laura and Justin's overflowing collection of Magic the Gathering cards. And that's making me extremely happy going through that and using it to build a deck. I'm kind of getting back into that game. Day before yesterday, losing track of time, I, for the very first time in my life, went to Friday Night Magic, which, and I'm sure we've got a few Magic the Gathering players out there. It's a 25-year-old game at this point. That's sort of an event, you know, you go down to your local shop, in this case, Coral Sword, shout out to Sandy. And, you know, you can play in a little mini tournament, and they have this every week. And in this case, it was a draft tournament. I've never played Magic as a draft in the draft format before, and it was really, really fun. Even though I lost all my games, I've been reading up on, you know, theories on what to pick in a draft and things like that. It's been really, really fun re-exploring something that I loved when I was like 15. So if that's not making me happy, I don't know what is.
What's your favorite card of the shoebox full of unlooked at cards we sent you?
So I guess out of that shoebox, what I am finding the most use for is I'm building a deck for a kind of Magic called Commander. And for anyone who's never heard of Magic stuff like this, I don't know if this explanation will make sense, but you make a very large deck. You make a 100-card deck, and you have one character card, one legendary creature card that's your kind of commander card. It's like it's out from the beginning of the game. You can bring it back as many times as you want. And so in building that, every single one of those 100 cards has to be unique. And the best card out of the group of cards that you sent me, I guess there's two. One is just called Thran Dynamo. And Thran Dynamo is just a very simple kind of mana card, but it's very important to have that kind of card in your deck. And then the second one is called Hematite Talisman. And I want to thank you for Hematite Talisman because it works so well with my commander. The commander that I chose is a guy named Felden of the Third Path. And Felden of the Third Path has the ability to take your dead cards, your dead creatures, and bring them back as artifacts. So he's like a tinkerer who, you know, his story is he's a sad old man whose wife died, and he uses his magic to try to bring her back, but he realizes he can only bring back a copy of her. But what's great is that with the Hematite Talisman, I can bring back 2 copies of a card. So it's great. I'm having a lot of fun just sort of exploring all those cards. And I'm going to be trying to trade some of them to kind of build up the rest of the cards I want for my commander deck. I'm trying not to spend too much money and it's been really fun, really fun to kind of get back into it and see how the game has evolved over the past 15 years.
Yeah, I played a lot of Magic as well. I love the draft system, and it also has, I think part of the reason I love deck building board games is so much. That is essentially, from my understanding, kind of what inspired a lot of those deck building games is the...
Yeah, I think it created the kind of the pattern that so many of these games are based on.
Oddly, my only exposure to this is a huge name drop, but my only exposure to Magic was when the company that produces the cards were looking for someone to build a demo of it, and I wrote like a how to do mechanics for an online version, and then I set that off and I never heard from them again. So that is my only exposure, was they had me learn the game so I could help them prototype a online version. Nice. And then I never...
It's okay, Laura. We've said for years, like, one of the main reasons we, started trying to get you on the show is you're the only one of us with actual game design history and background, and so...
I've played the least Magic, but the most professional
anytime
capacity.
You can sort of just drop that into the show, I think it's totally fine. Laura, what's making you happy right now?
So there is a website called onthegrid.city, and its concept is that designers in different neighborhoods of a city that know it really well, they either work there or live there, write up guides to that city. So, in Chicago, there's a lot of local shops that will say, hey, we work and live in Wicker Park. Here are our favorite go-to spots. And since it's a design company, it's a really nice mix of stores, cool local neighborhood eating joints, like all kinds of stuff like that. The last 3 weekends, Justin and I have tried to, we might be moving from Chicago. So we've been trying to go to places we haven't gone to before. We've found, through the site, in 5 minutes of driving, like a great Filipino breakfast place. We went to a French cafe and we had a paprika smoked salmon head for breakfast, which is... sounds disgusting, was really fun. They were like, it's super messy, but if you're up for it, like, it's $15, go for it. And we tried it and it was super fun. And this last weekend we went to a southern place and I had fried green tomatoes Benedict on cornbread.
Ooh.
All places I never would have heard of. They're tiny, very neighborhoody places. I've used this when I've traveled in... when we were on our honeymoon, I used it in Ljubljana. I've used it in Montreal on business trips, but this is one of the first times I've used it for my own neighborhood. It's really fun to look at it, a neighborhood well, and say, oh, they pointed out the pothole, or they pointed out my favorite pie shop, and then picking one that's a little out of the way. We used it as an excuse because we were donating a bunch of school supplies and stuff to Goodwill, just trying to get our Beatrice out of our house. While we were in neighborhoods we hadn't been before, we used it as a way to find new places. It's really nice to get a different side of a city you think you know. So onthegrid.city is really good if you're traveling, but also maybe look at a area of town you haven't been to in a while. It's a good excuse to kind of re-see your city.
Yeah, I love that. That sounds like a great idea. And there's a place in St. Louis that also uses cornbread for just about everything that you would normally use, like English muffins or whatever, and it's fantastic. It's one of my favorite restaurants.
It was fantastic. They were playing Last Unicorn the whole time we were eating breakfast.
That's awesome.
It was wonderful.
Great. So mine, 2 real small things making me happy. Lola started walking, which is awesome but also terrifying, but that's making me happy. And also I know these have been in other cities for a while now, but St. Louis recently got infested with motorized scooters from 2 different companies, Lime and Bird, and
I wish that would happen to Houston.
And it's like $1 to start it, and then it's 15 cents a minute after that, which is pretty cheap to just like be able to hop on a scooter and ride it around. And I did it for the first time the other day. They can go upwards of 20 miles per hour, if not faster, if you're on a hill. I almost ate it real hard, but I didn't, and it was fun. So I don't know, it's great. Like I love this business model of just like dropping a bunch of things into a city having little GPS trackers on them so they kind of know where they are, giving you an app to activate it, you pay for it, and then just see what happens. They're all over. We saw someone the other day. I will never understand how they did this, but they had two, one on each foot, hands on each handles, and they were just going. It was what? Wonderful. So so I don't know if they're in your city and you why
But
not?
why?
It's wonderful. So I don't know, it's fun, and it made me happy to ride one, so that's making me happy. Cool. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. If you like our show and want to tell us about it or want to promote it, first of all, tell your friends. That's like the best way people find out about podcasts. That's how I find out about the most of the podcasts. But also, you can go to iTunes and leave us a review. We love to hear them, read them. I'll read it on the show if you say something nice. It really supports the show, and we really, truly appreciate it. You can also go to theshortgame.net, fill out a contact form. If you want to recommend a game, a large percentage of the games we covered on the show come from recommendations. If you've recommended a game before and we haven't done it, we have it on a list. That's where we go to all the time when we start looking for new games. We'll probably do it at some point. Please let us know. There's so many games that would have never known about if it wasn't for your game recommendations. You can also see our back catalog on that website as well. You can follow the show on Twitter at _shortgame. You can follow me on Twitter at NateSTL. Laura, where can people follow you?
You can find me on Twitter at Laura J. Nash.
Awesome. There's that J again. And Shane, how about you?
You can follow me on Twitter at 8bitshane. And you can follow Peter Molyneux at Peter Molyneux. And he has some advice for lovers of short games. If you think an action game campaign mode is too short, why not pause the game for a minute after every kill and think about who they were?
Dear God.
Words to live by.
Okay, and on that, thank you again so much for listening to The Short Game, and we'll see you next time.